All right. So we're going to begin with Marilyn. Marilyn Rouvelas, who will introduce herself and her work and then the presentation. Okay, and then we will go to Nick Vojdev, and then we'll go to Michael Sakalos, okay, and we'll close with Johnson Leeds, okay? Come on.
Does this work?
Yes.
Yes, we
Okay.
hear you.
I'll use that. So, I've got these progressive lenses, so I got like.
Just
I
get
didn't
close
mean
to the
have
mic.
it
That's it.
Well, my name is Marilyn Rouvelas, as Elizabeth said, and I live here in the Washington area. I think the reason that I was invited is because I have written a book that came out about 20 years ago called A Guide to Greek Traditions and Customs in America. Whoa, and I know we're trying to get away from ethnicity, so
Well, you can affirm it.
Pardon?
You can affirm it. It's not prohibited.
Right. I think what we come to realize after a while is that each of our backgrounds, our ethnic backgrounds, have beautiful, beautiful traditions in them. I'm not Greek. I came into the faith because I married someone that was a Creole Orthodox Greek, Greek and Orthodox, and I was raised a Lutheran. And then after we got married and had a child, then I converted to Orthodoxy. So I basically was one of those people from the big fat Greek wedding, you know, with the big, looking at the big family, the eyes big wide like that, and not knowing what was going on. And I think actually, and I said to my husband at the time, this is back in 1967, you know, is there a book that will kind of explain to me, not just about the faith, because I've been handed Timothy Ware's book, but kind of what, you know, Greek people are doing, what their social customs are and this kind of thing, and how they do different celebrations, why you have to go to Greek school, things like that. So my book was a little bit different in that it would combine both the religious, the orthodoxy, and the cultural traditions. Because I looked at it as just kind of a study in foreign country. I really had wanted to go to the Peace Corps, but instead I wound up here in Greek Orthodox and came into a foreign country basically. So anyway, what I would hope for all of us is that someday when we are one church, we will respect each other's traditions. I mean, I will have to say about the Greek that it was the language of the time. Obviously Christ didn't speak Greek. But St. Paul wrote his letters in Greek. It's the language that the religion was spread in, because Greek was the equivalent of English back then. If you wanted to get the message out, you wrote it in Greek. And so it's the language of Christianity, the beginning language in the way that Hebrew is of Jewish, or Hindu is, or Sanskrit for Jewish. So I mean, I think we have to, when we come together, let's look at what is very special about the different ethnic components. And so someday maybe there'll be a massive, very large book about how we all are basically the same with these different flavors of it. I actually had to deal with that when I was writing the book, there were women from 12 different parts of Greece. Okay, and we had to reconcile regional differences in Greek Orthodoxy, so how they kept their traditions. And it worked out, and I feel it was really the Holy Spirit that was with us that made this book possible. But while dealing with the traditions, I really became very fervently believing in two traditions that I think have potential for the future of the Orthodox Church, because that's what our panel is about, is the future. And so the first one will bring in new energy and new people. The first one is the diaconate, the ministry of deacons. And then the second is the practice of stillness. I was going to say the Greek word isukia, but we'll just leave it at stillness.
Yes, is an English word.
Now it is an English word?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, since I don't pronounce it, there was confusion with my husband this morning about the Greek way to say it and the English way to say it, so I'm just going to say stillness, okay? Is stillness okay with everybody? Well, these two things, the diaconate and stillness, may seem completely unrelated. Actually, they are unrelated. But I happen to be, as I said, working in these two traditions right now, and feel that there's a lot of potential. So that's why I'm working with these two unrelated traditions. So first about the diaconate and reviving the diaconate. This is actually about having more deacons serving in our church. As you know, our priests do a fantastic job. When I think about what they have to do, besides just doing the sacraments, the liturgies, they do fundraising, they do pastoral counseling, they have to be at the festivals, and they have to be Christ-like on top of everything else. So it's really a huge job that they have, and they're really overwhelmed, and they need help. Now, what did the apostles do when they needed help? Well, if we go back to the New Testament in Acts 6, 1 to 6, they appointed 7 deacons. Okay, these were to help serve. And in Romans 16, 1 through 2, St. Paul designated the first woman deacon, and her name was St. Phoebe. But I was able to, or had the privilege of editing a book. What is that here? A book that came out, Holy Cross put it out in 2009. It's called Remembering and Reclaiming Diaconia. And this is by Father John Krasavich. He wrote a history of it, and then the main point of the book was that the golden age of the diaconate was actually in the 2nd and 3rd century. So this was in the early church. Okay, and then the ecumenical councils got involved, and there were a lot of rules put on. There were, excuse me for simplifying, there were a lot of rules put on things, and then, the hierarchy developed. But let's see, just a second, sorry. So the three levels of the ministry were developed: the deacons, the priests, and the bishop. Basically, there are different theories. I won't go into all the different ideas about what the purposes of those are. In Father John's book, he basically is saying that the deacons is service, the priest is basically sacrificial, and the bishop is it's unity. Of course, as we all know, service is an ethic for all of them, but also for us, as it was for Christ, who was really the first deacon who said, be a servant to everyone. Also, in the book, Father John talks about women deacons, and then there's another book, it's a definitive book about women deacons in the Orthodox Church by Kitty Keith Fitzgerald. And this book came out, I think, in '97, so it's been out for a while. She built on work that was actually done by the mother of one of our panelists, Nick. And so she was an early pioneer in writing. She's Presbytera, and she was an early pioneer in writing about women deacons. So in Kitty Keith's book, she also makes a very strong case for revival of the whole diaconate. And there is a modern movement, is not the word. This was extensively studied, and kind of the definitive conclusion about women deacons, okay, whether they, well, first of all, did they exist? Were they actually ordained, or were they appointed? Okay, because this became a very contentious issue. In 1988, the Ecumenical Patriarch convened an inter-Orthodox consultation, okay, which said definitely they were ordained, the sacrament is still on the books, and it has never been revoked. Okay, it was revoked in the Catholic Church, but the Orthodox Church did not revoke it. Okay. So how does all of this relate to the future of the Orthodox Church? Well, what I'm hoping is that by reviving the entire diaconate, that we have more deacons, the priests will have more help, we will be able to reach more of our community. the deacons will be able to bring in new gifts and new talents to be able to reach more people. Deacons can do all kinds of things. They're, in addition to assisting bishops, assisting at the liturgy, they can take Holy Communion to people that are sick. They can lead youth programs. They can be wonderful administrators, like the proto-deacon last night that we heard, Proto-Deacon Peter, who is sounds like just an incredible asset to help the Assembly of Bishops. Father John, who wrote this book, he is a deacon, he's an archdeacon to the Ecumenical Patriarch. There are just so many different ways that we can use them, and we need to expand our thinking on what they can do. So why don't we have more deacons in the church? Actually, this is starting to change. There are 4 jurisdictions that have programs to train deacons that are in the United States right now. The Antiochians, the OCA, and the Carpatho-Russians have had them for quite a while. And the Greek Orthodox actually just started a program in 2007. And I did a survey last week of how many deacons that each of these churches have. So it turns out the OCA has 186 deacons. The Antiochians have 174. The GOA has 61. And the Carpatho-Russian have 21. Now, I haven't gone into the depth to find out now how many of those deacons are really on the way to being priests. Okay, I mean, to really drill down into this, we'd have to find out, you know, how many are just, you know, in line to be priests. But with this revival, I think that's going on with diaconate, I think there's lots of new energy that can be brought to the church. And I think if for women deacons, I'm hoping that it would stem the tide of young women leaving the church, like our daughter, okay? She just said to me, she's 41 now, and she has a daughter. She says, "Mom, I don't want my daughter raised in a sexist church, and I'm not going to go to the Orthodox church." And you know, she's 41 years old, so you know, there are many. So what I've said to her is, I'm going to do what I can. I know about this tradition, and I will try to do what I can. She finds this offensive. I think one of the reasons is because back in the 5th century, when we did have a number of women deacons, there was my favorite deaconess is Saint Olympias. She was a deaconess at Saint Sophia Cathedral in Constantinople. And she was one of the closest confidants of St. John Chrysostom. And she was one of 40 women deacons that St. Sophia Cathedral had at that time that were working in the church. So how do we bring about this kind of change? Yeah, I think that the laugh is, you know, how do we bring this about? Okay. I was told that the conscience of the church needs to be raised about the issue, and someone had said to me that basically means that until the bishops start talking about it as something that is a possibility or should be looked at, it's just not going to be even addressed. Okay, so in desperation or whatever, I am turning to the internet. Okay. And we've started a website. We just launched it yesterday, as a matter of fact. And I'll just pass these around.
I'll do it for you.
Okay. It's a website called www.orthodoxdeacons.org. And it's about to give the history of the diaconate. It goes in depth into the traditions, answers a lot of questions, what deacon can do, tells about the programs, the existing programs. And also what I call like the beating heart of it is that we have a beautiful prayer that was written by a priest about reviving the diaconate, and we would like people from different Orthodox jurisdictions, men and women, to sign on to the prayer. It's a public prayer, and then when you go on the sign-in page, you can see other Orthodox that have signed their names to this. Okay, so that at some point we can hopefully talk about the conscience of the church on this issue. So I really appreciate your taking a look at this when you go home, and I hope you will find it informative. The second tradition that I have really fallen in love with is the stillness tradition. This, I think, has the potential to help the future of the church basically in two ways, externally and internally. Now, externally, I think that there is, we have so much to offer new people who have, are recently discovering the power of stillness. And they may be finding it in yoga, they may be finding it in Buddhism, okay? Medical people are talking about the importance of meditation. And here we've had this tradition for so long in our church. But it's actually, I was really delighted that we talked about it so much today in the other sessions about the mysticism and the Jesus prayer. Because for a long time it really has been a well-kept secret from the laity. Back when I wrote the traditions book in '92 and discovered in my reading about the Jesus prayer, my priest, who is the religious editor, said, don't put that in because that's for monastics and, it's not for the laity. Just don't even put it in the book. So I actually discovered stillness as an adult in my yoga class. So I was really happy to find out about the possibilities about the long tradition in our church. Remember the yoga teacher saying, you're always going to have chaos around you, and the only peaceful place is really within yourself. And the core of Orthodox spirituality comes from Psalms 46:10, which is, be still and know that I am God. And that is really the essence of what we are getting to with stillness. It's a way to be close to God, to hear Him, and clear our mind of our passions and our worries. So how would we share this with non-Orthodox? How do we even share it within our own parishes? I really would like to see that each parish would start silent prayer groups. There was one that was going at St. Sophia Cathedral here in DC for a while. It had to close down for some reasons, and I'm hoping they'll start again. And we're starting one at St. Catherine's in Falls Church. This is before the Women's Book Club, and hopefully it'll expand to some other people too. And if you think this is a pipe dream, it's really not. The Catholics have done so much work in this area. Used basically by Benedictine monks. If you've heard of Thomas Merton, Thomas Keating. Thomas Keating started several organizations dedicated to centering prayer. John Main started something called the World Community for Christian Meditation. So they are way ahead of us on this in terms of organizationally and getting it down to our parishes. It's really fascinating that St. Benedictine, who lived in the 5th to 6th century, was heavily influenced by someone named St. John Cassian. You may have heard of him. St. John was Romanian, but he went to the Holy Land and he spent time with the Desert Fathers back in the 4th century. I think he spent maybe 5 or 6 years there. Then he went to Constantinople. He was ordained a deacon by St. John Chrysostom, and then he came to France, where he landed in Marseille, and he started a monastery there. So, and he did these writings that St. Benedictine took and based a lot of his work about stillness from St. John Cassian. So again, you see that connection back to our tradition in the desert in the East. It was actually my joy to go to Marseille last month, and if you go to this church that they have there, they have the relics of St. John Cassian. So to be able to meditate and be quiet in front of his relics was a very, very special time that I will never forget. The second way that stillness, I think, can affect the future of the church is internally for each of us, to strengthen the faith of each of us. And the time is right, as we talked about earlier in the other sessions. There are more monasteries now. Just the number of books that are out there about this topic. When you think about it, the Philokalia, which is it's a collection of spiritual texts from the 4th to the 15th century. All those 4 volumes that it is right now, they weren't even available in English until 1995. The first volume came out in 1951, but just think about it, that's very recent for us to have this available to us here in America. And of course, Norris Conley did the Jesus video, the history of the Jesus prayer, which played on public television. I just thought that was tremendous. I'll just put another little plug here. The reason I got interested in this topic was how much it had given to me personally, and it brought back to me when I was a child. Okay, my mother was a pretty strict person, and she did what her mother did to her, that when I did something wrong, I was to go sit on a stairway, a dark stairway, and think about what a bad person I was. Okay? As a child, you resist that. And there were many other times when I would take my bike and go right out, and I would sit, by the river or in the woods that we had, feel the sunshine, and just feel that I was a part of God and know that I was good. And so it all comes together with the Orthodox faith that we are good. We're not these terrible people. We're made in the image of God. And yet we have these, what the church calls passions. Anger, jealousy, lying, these kinds of things that take us away from the goodness within us. So what we've done I've written with another woman who actually is an elementary school counselor, 2 books, children's books for ages 8 to 10. They're going to be published by Holy Cross, hopefully are coming out in December. It's a series called The Silent Way, a series about passions and stillness. And so we are hoping to teach our children at this very young age the power of stillness, of being good. A lot of talk about the image of God, that you're in the image of God. And then the second thing is to explain what passions are. That it's normal to have them. Little Peter in this book about anger says, am I bad because I feel angry? Everybody's mad at me for being angry. And he writes, the format is he writes his papu, okay, who answers these letters back and forth. And papu is very kind, very sweet. He's really a spiritual father, but he's your papu. Okay, so he explains to Peter, it's normal to have passions, this happens, and sometimes passions can be changed for the good. For example, if you're really mad because the river is polluted, you do something to change that. But we all have to work on our passions, okay? So we're hoping, I asked somebody one time what was the list of passions in the Orthodox Church? And he pointed me to the Philokalia, and I think it's St. John Themacus, 268 passions, so we may have a lot of books too, eventually. But anyway, I feel that this understanding the importance of stillness and also working on the passions is very important for each individual in the church. And I imagine that each of our parishes doing silent prayers together, and imagine the energy that comes from doing it together. I mean, it's beautiful to do it alone, but it's also beautiful to do silent prayer together. And then I imagine parish councils doing it before their meetings. I imagine the force field of unity that could happen if we did pan-Orthodox silent prayers together. So I feel optimistic about that. So in conclusion, I hope we can think very positively about the potential for the future of the Orthodox Church that come from 2 of these traditions of the diaconate and stillness. I think one of the biggest strengths of the church is how its very old traditions can mysteriously renew, revigorate, and heal the body of Christ.